Well, good evening, everybody. Graydon, Pelley here. Welcome to another edition of TalkNL. We're so glad that we get the opportunity to share comments and views and ideas, and we have some great discussion here. And we're asking that you would leave some comments or leave things that you want to share on our comment part. So we look forward to hearing from you. We want to welcome my sidekick, Rudy Norman, here on the podcast with us again this evening. And Rudy, of course, I've got to first of all correct myself. Not even Rudy picked up on this mistake I made a couple of weeks ago. And when I said that we welcome Rudy Norman from Burlington on the Northern Peninsula, and he didn't even pick up on it. And I picked up on it as soon as I listened to the next podcast, or when I reviewed it after. It's on the Bay Verte Peninsula, Rudy. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But, there's no major harm done, I'm sure. But how's it going?
Good. I don't know who you offended more, the people on the Bay Verte Peninsula or the people on the Northern Peninsula.
Good point. Yeah, we'll leave that where it is.
Yeah. We won't do a survey or anything. It's going good, Graydon. I mean, things are pretty busy, and I think spring is in the air now. And as the old fellers say, now the snow is taking some cutting. Beautiful day here.
No, it's fantastic. Actually, I'm getting a bit of feedback here. I got to turn myself down. There you go. Yeah. So, how's everything on the Bay Verte Peninsula? You're still got a bit of winter left, do you?
We still got a little bit of winter. I think the guys on the skidoers are enjoying the back country where there's some more snow, but there's definitely some underground showing now, and things are finally taking a turn, I think so.
Yeah, it looks like over the next day or so we might get our last little bit. We know Sheila's brush got to come, and
yes,
our St. Paddy's Day batch, so I guess that's what we're going to be getting over the next day or so.
Yeah. So I've been looking forward to this, though. I mean, we don't have a guest this week because it's been a very, very interesting week on the NL politics side. Hashtag NL Poly, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I've been looking forward to this conversation because things are taking a turn in that world as well, not just the weather-wise, but I mean, things are taking a turn every day now. It seems like there's something else that we're hearing from people that, is causing some other controversy since we talked last week. So what?
Yeah, like every week I say to myself, we're going to get away from the political thing and try to talk about some other issues and some other things.
Right.
But, Rudy, something just pops up every other time, and we can't seem to get away from it. And I believe it's important enough that we talk about it and we get the comments from people that want to share comments. But listen, it's the political scene in this province is really raising some eyebrows, and we're really finding that people are questioning leadership and the way things are being done.
Yeah, and we're still, I guess technically we're still in a provincial election, Graydon. It's still ongoing. No one really even knows when it's going to end. We're giving very vague timelines. We're told that it could take this long, but the thing that bothers me most, I think, is the fact that we are literally just making this up as we go along. And I shouldn't say we. I should say there's one individual in this province right now who holds our entire democratic system in the palm of his hand and is basically toying with it and doing whatever he so desires with no guidance, with no legislation that backs him up, no authority in any way, shape, or form, other than the fact that he has a title and he feels he can do whatever he wants.
And the thing about it is, we're looking forward to, next week sometime. The 25th is supposed to be the cutoff for ballots getting into elections NL. But again, in the last couple of days, we're told that that's not written in stone and that could change.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, now we've also got the candidates in Labrador who are rightfully so, I think, calling for the extension of their ballots. They want the date of I think it's March 25th. They want that date to be a postmark date. And I mean, we've heard reports. I mean, we've seen candidates down there that have said, you know, especially like in places like Nain and some of the remote communities in Labrador, mail service just hasn't been reliable.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's very unlikely that these ballots may even make it to St. John's by the deadline. So if they don't, then what then? I mean, are they just discounted? Like, you know, where does this lead us?
Just to put a little bit of humor into this, Rudy, I was of course right at the beginning of the campaign, I was taken down with a medical issue and had to go to hospital. If I had known what I know now, I could have left my name on the ballot, and I had lots of time to campaign after I got out and recovered.
Well, there you go. Because I mean, the campaigning hasn't stopped, and that's the thing. I mean, these parties are still running ads. Candidates are still running ads.
Yeah.
Even though technically there's been some arguments on whether or not that's allowed or not, but I think a lot of them are getting away with technicalities because the legislation is so archaic. It says that, you know, there's not allowed to be any radio ads or print ads or anything. But this legislation was written before Facebook existed, before Twitter existed, before online ads existed. Right. So I mean, you know, they're getting they're kind of not respecting the spirit of the legislation in my mind, and they're just taking it literally and getting around it. So, you know, Graydon, it's disconcerting, I think, because, you know, we're just there's no semblance of structure in any of it, and we're just going by the seat of our pants, it seems like.
Yeah, and back to, just before we get into a couple of more topics, Rudy, back to the position you were talking about, the candidates in Labrador with the concerns that they have with regards to deadline and weather and you know, airplanes and mail and so on and so forth. They certainly have a legitimate point that they're making, and again, according to what I'm observing, and this is Graydon Pelley's opinion, these things were not taken into consideration when this election was called.
No, exactly. You're exactly right, Graydon. It wasn't taken into consideration, and I really think that delegitimizes this entire election. I think that because these things weren't taken into consideration, I think that's going to be the challenge here. And if, depending on how the results go, if it's not in certain people's favor, I think we're going to see some court challenges, and all of this is going to go towards that.
So, Rudy, let's get at the real issues here now. We can't seem to get away from the opinions and the ideas about the call of this election and what information and what grounds the Premier had for this. And we got another enlightening moment this past week during a COVID-19 update when the doctor from the medical school was on talking about modeling and, of course, the thing that the news reporters are reporting. And I went through the news report and I wrote down some things, and I think it's worth our while to look at some statements that were made, okay? And it goes back to, you know, in February, when the Premier made a statement about the election, and he said that the probabilistic modeling showing that the possible COVID spikes were coming mid to late March. And in the COVID briefing this week, and the Premier went on to say that, you know, the numbers were low and the modeling showed that a spike would be towards the end of March. And then, of course, the Radio Canada requested a copy of the modeling report, and they were denied this when they made the request through ATIP, and they were denied the information because it was considered a cabinet record. And then, of course, we got in the COVID-19 briefing, and Dr. Rahman said that the discussions they had were around what was needed when it comes to ICU and how fast they would have to respond if they were called upon. And he said there was no modeling towards at all involving what the Premier said he based his decision on. So, I mean, come on, like, people in this province, and I'd like to know what the Liberal people and what the PCs and what the NDP and the Independents and the NL Alliance people across this province think about what's being said and done to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like William Neville says here, the only thing Fury considered was his lead in the polls. I happen to agree with William, and I think I saw it early on when Premier Fury made the comment that he looked at the numbers, and someone said, well, the only numbers he looked at was the approval rating or the poll number that said that he would probably get a majority if he went to the polls right then. I mean, you know, we're seeing a lot of backpedaling, Graydon. Honestly, we're seeing a lot of people or a lot of things happening now, and especially with Premier Fury, he's on the defensive. He's trying to justify his decision, and I mean, this is all happening within an election. I think the thing that we need to be most aware of here is the fact that everything was said so blatantly. I mean, Premier Fury has touted himself as a doctor, as he's got a master's in epidemiology. I think he's trying to position himself as the guy who knows best here. And it really backfired on him because the thing he feared most came upon him. And he got caught with, basically he got caught with his foot in his mouth. And everybody now is basically saying, "How we told you so," and it's he's got pie on his face. So I think the thing that concerns me most is that he's not coming out and just saying, "Hey, I was wrong."
The thing about it is, what I find is this, and this is really frustrating to me, is that Premier Fury, he tried his darndest to justify the bad decision that he made. And he was willing to, or not willing, he did insinuate the evidence was based on recommendations he got from people around him and other people, when in fact, he said, I assigned my own decisions, he said, based on data from 3 other provinces. And the doctor from the university said, we just talked in hypotheticals. And the Premier said, after that was said, the Premier had to draw back a bit and say, oh, yeah, well, I made my own decision. And the bottom line is, it was his prerogative to call the election, like he said before. And it didn't matter what came in his pathway. It didn't matter what others said. He was going to have an election at this time.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is probably most concerning is that he's double talking. He's saying one thing and then he's backing it up and saying, "Oh no, I did something else." So I mean, he started out by saying that he consulted with Dr. Fitzgerald and his team and her team. He consulted public health. He consulted Elections NL. He consulted all these people, and they all agreed that this was the best time to have an election. That's what he started out here, and that was his justification. Then all of a sudden we discover that none of that was true, and he comes out and says, "Well, and so we said, well, let's see the information that you did use," and he says, "Well, no, that's a cabinet confidence thing that we can't show you that." And then when he got criticized for that, he said, "Well, you know what? I used the information that was on the government website, the government of Canada's website. I used the information that was on there. It's publicly available. I don't know why it's not released." So if he doesn't know why it's not released, why isn't he going to the office of the information privacy commissioner and saying, hey, listen, I relinquished cabinet secrecy on this. He has that authority. He has the ability to say, whatever document was asked for, I relinquished cabinet secrecy on it. Please release it to the public.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the bottom line is, and I like what this one person here said, there's a huge portion of information being withheld from the average resident of the province, and it's rather telling. Now, this is quite a statement, and we've known this. Like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. It's just absolutely unbelievable. But Rudy, I want to ask you a question, and I want to ask a question to the people that are listening this evening and the people that will listen, is this: after we have seen from the beginning what the Premier has done, we've listened to Dr. Fitzgerald, we listened to Bruce Chalk with Elections NL, we have listened to Dr. Rahman, and now my question is this: what conclusions can we make? What are conclusions? I got one that I'm going to share in a minute, but let's think, everybody. Now, what conclusions are you coming up with after seeing this fiasco, unfold over the last, 62 days now?
I think there, well, like you said, there are a lot of conclusions, depending on who you're talking about. The conclusion I have with the Elections NL is that they were nowhere near ready for a COVID election. They had no plan B, let alone a plan C, plan D, or whatever. They had no plan B. And I'll give you a very real example of this now, Graydon. So I live in a community where we have one polling station in our community. Okay, we're a small community, and we have one polling station. So that polling station is usually held at the municipal building in town. So the night before, the day before the election, of course, I mean, we were seeing a surplus in cases throughout the province. We were seeing a spike of startling results and whatnot. And I mean, there was no telling of where it was. There was, no one had known about the variant at this point. The election was supposedly still going on. In-person voting was still happening. And that didn't change until 8:30 that night, if you remember. Right. So earlier in the day, the town council, who is responsible for the municipal building, they made the announcement and said, listen, we're taking an abundance of caution here. We don't feel comfortable opening our public building to anyone right now because of what's going on in the province. We know that people are saying it's isolated to the Avalon. We're seeing most of the cases on the Avalon, but we know people in the area that have traveled to the Avalon recently. We know people from our town that have been in St. John's recently and come back. So, we don't know how far this has gone, and we want to be very cautious here. So they made the decision, and they announced it publicly that they were closing the municipal building. They weren't allowing any public in the municipal building. Now, this is where the polling station for in-person voting was going to happen the next day. They contacted the Elections NL, and they said, hey, listen, we're closing the public building. Unfortunately, the building is not going to be able to be used for in-person voting tomorrow. You know that Elections NL didn't even have an alternate site for a polling station.
Wow.
They were scrambling. They had no way of letting people know where else they could vote. I mean, there are other buildings in town. There are churches in town. There are, there's things, there's neighboring towns, wherever. I mean, they had options, but they had nothing in place. At the 11th hour, okay, at the 11th hour, they were looking for a resident to volunteer. This is true fact here, okay? They were looking for a resident to volunteer their basement or their shed to be used as a polling station. That's wow. Where we were at, right? Now, of course, that wasn't needed because a couple hours after that, because I mean, the situation unfolded rather quickly.
Yeah.
A couple hours after that, of course, we got the announcement of the B11 variant, and then Bruce Chalk, stopped in-person voting. But it was so telling of how unprepared Elections NL was. Let's remove the pandemic from the equation. The building could have burned down. The building could have flooded. The building could have, any number of things could have happened to the building so that that place couldn't have been used as a polling station. Pandemic or no pandemic, where were people going to go to vote? You mean to say that when Elections NL goes out and finds a polling place, they don't find an alternate just in case? They don't say, hey, well, obviously not, right? So I mean, there's no foresight. There's no thought to what if. It's just everything is taken for granted. And obviously we saw that on full display when we faced the pandemic election. They had no alternate plan. They had no way of saying, well, if this doesn't work, we'll do this, or if that doesn't work, we'll do that. They had no way of saying, hey, listen, if an outbreak occurs, we can go to mail-in voting, and this is how it's going to be done. Or, they didn't have any phone voting available. We saw other provinces that had pandemic elections, but they had these systems in place. They had things there. BC had phone voting in case for people who couldn't go out and do in-person voting.
So Rudy, from the just on that thought, what you're saying there. So do you think it's possible that our premier, who called the election in consultation, and I use that term loosely, with Elections NL,
allegedly,
felt that, well, whatever will be, will be. We'll just take whatever comes. We're confident, we know, it doesn't matter. We'll just go ahead with it anyway.
Well, I'll tell you now, Graydon, and this goes right back to, we saw this at the leadership for the Liberal leader when Andrew Furey was first elected. It was almost like we were going through a formality. It was almost like, hey, listen, we know this guy's going to win. We know he's going to be premier. He's destined to be premier. He's the guy we all want to be premier. Everybody else just roll over. John Abbott, what are you doing with yourself? Running against him. Just throw your support behind this guy and let him do what he's going to do and let him be premier. And I think that's the entitlement attitude that this election was called under. I really feel that it was almost like, hey, listen, we're 60% in the polls. We're going to have a short election. Let's just get through this, make me premier, give me a majority, and let me go home and run the province the way I want to run it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So Rudy, we're basically, I mean, there's so many thoughts going through my mind now. We're basically through the election now, for all intents and purposes, right? We're at the last part of it, unless, we don't know what kind of challenges might come after the fact from whoever. Depends on who wins and who loses, I guess. But let's take a look at the question I asked was what conclusions do people have? What have you been hearing from people about Andrew Furey, the premier, and the moves that he's made with regards to, the COVID briefings, in regards to things that have been announced, and with regards to task force and things like that? What are people saying now as opposed to before the fact, do you think?
You know what? It's hard to say because, I mean, you can't base things on Twitter, okay?
Oh, no.
Because you're in a Twitter bubble. I mean, that's the most vocal part of, like I say, a hashtag NL Poly. But I mean, Graydon, I don't know if the electorate as a whole. I mean, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, unfortunately, voter apathy is a big issue, and I mean, as much as we've heard about on Twitter about outrage that Premier Furey was at the briefings while there's an election on the go, outraged at things with elections in L and all that, and people not getting ballots and people getting the wrong ballots. We haven't heard a lot of that from the mainstream media, and I mean, a big part of the electorate probably, in all likelihood, still gets their information and their news per se from the 6 o'clock news, right? Or from the newspaper or wherever. So I mean, we haven't heard a lot of outrage from the media. Is what I'm saying.
I mean,
so
I've listened, I've looked, and I've listened intently, and there's a couple more things we want to talk about, but there's so much here that's hidden. And I've looked and I've watched our premier, and I wonder who in the world is around him and what are they saying to him about all the things that's going on. Because in my observation, what I have seen so far is that Premier Fury he'll do and say anything to convince himself that what he does and says is real and upfront and truthful. He's willing to use anyone he encounters to place the blame on, because we've seen that. It's the CMO, it's the CEO, and now it's the doctor from the health science about the modeling. And he will place blame on anyone he encounters so that he doesn't have to take the responsibility for his misleading behavior and his bad decisions. I mean, what kind of future are we in for if this is the kind of leadership that we are going to have for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador? Where are we headed as a people, as a province?
Well, and I mean, it's disturbing. I find it disturbing, obviously. But I find a lot of things disturbing, Graydon. I find the lack of response from some of the opposition parties as well. Very, very disturbing. I find, the fact that if Ches Crosby wins this election and becomes premier, it's very unlikely that he's even going to challenge the result. As illegitimate and disturbing as we find this now, unfortunately, if it's in the PC's favor, they're probably not going to challenge it. If it's in the NDP's favor, they're probably not going to challenge it. I really think that says a lot about our political system and also some of the people that we have involved in our provincial politics. The fact of the matter is, self-serving politicians have taken on this province for far too long. We've seen way too much squandered because we have people in power that have been there just for themselves. Whether that's the age-old adage, well, you're just there for a pension, or you're just there for the salary or the benefits or the whatever it is, and not there to serve the people of the province. And I don't see how any politician, elected or unelected, can sit by and say that we're having a fair and equitable election right now for all people in this province. We're simply not. All people in this province are not given equal opportunity to vote in this election. All people in this province are not given a solid choice when it comes to casting their vote. There's going to be a lot of people that wanted to vote and didn't get a chance to vote because of timelines, because of technology limitations, because of technology illiteracy or whatever. There's going to be some people that's probably not going to get their vote counted because it's not going to get to St. John's by March 25th, the arbitrary date that Bruce Chalk just probably threw a dart at the calendar and picked, and anybody who thinks that one individual should have the absolute authoritarian power to decide when and where people vote and how they vote and who gets to vote is ludicrous. It's the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my life. Nowhere else in this country, I don't think, would this stand. I would not even venture to guess what would happen if some other province face similar situations that we face now, and they would come out and just allow one individual, one person, no matter what their title is, I don't care what their title is or what their salary is or who appointed them or whatever, one person should not have the absolute power to decide who gets to vote, how often, when they get to vote, or what votes get to be counted. That's one person basically picking the premier. We're not here now. Bruce Chalk is not the king of Newfoundland and Labrador. He's treating himself like that because he knows that he's got the absolute power. He knows he's got the authoritarian approach. He's sending emails out to the various parties telling them that what he will allow and what he won't allow. So I mean, the talk of that, the absolute gall and the audacity of this man to say that he will allow representatives to visit his office and witness the voting, the vote counting and the democratic process that we
and
are
the latest
through.
Rudy, that the latest we got was, if you break the rules and if you don't listen to what I tell you got to do, I will punish you.
Yes, he will be to the fullest extent of his office. He will issue punishments. I mean, come on, give me a break. Who are you? Get off your high horse here now, and get some real common sense here, because we are living in an absolute theocracy. If we actually sit by and allow Bruce Chalk to pick the next blessified premier. I mean, I don't care, and I don't care who it is, whether it's Andrew Fury, Ches Crosby, Alison Coffin, or the Easter Bunny. It don't matter who the next premier is; they're going to be illegitimate because.
So, Rudy, let's take it.
Their process.
Let's take it outside of that. Let's take it outside of that now. What about? Did someone shut down the video? Someone is asking the question. I don't think so. Did we?
I don't think so. Are we still online? It's showing that we're still online.
Yeah, Rudy. But let's go a step higher. And I hate saying that because I don't want to. Let's move to the next level from Bruce Chalk, who is an employee of the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, who's appointed by the premier. So what about the power that's being shown there by the premier's office? I mean, look at the power that is in the premier's office and what the premier can do. He can appoint a cabinet that he knows is going to support him or her, whoever they are, and they can appoint all the committee members. They can appoint and hire and fire and do. I mean, that's the power in the premier's office. Come on, we are in 2021. This has to change, and I've got to go back to a comment that was said earlier here, Rudy, by Ron Reed. Ron said, I like you guys, but you need a solid platform, something more for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to grasp onto. And he's referring to us as NL Alliance. So the thing about it is, Ron, you can go to our website and see our guiding principles and see what our ideas and our thoughts and our platforms are all about. But the thing about it is, and Calvin Peach mentioned something here about democracy. It seems like people in Newfoundland and Labrador are satisfied with saying, well, we're in a democracy, we're allowed to vote. But voting is the smallest part of a democracy. It's everything outside of voting. It's how you're treated as constituents. It's how you're treated as a province. It's how you're given information or not given information. Like, are we really... I mean, what is democracy to people? I believe that nothing is going to change in Newfoundland on Newfoundland and Labrador until we have true democratic reform, which means taking power away from the premier's office and starting to change the way things are done from the top down. Nothing's going to change until that happens.
I've never been more convinced than now. And I mean, the problem is, I mean, we've supposedly got a democratic, all-party committee on democratic reform, which is the heights. And I'm soon going to get upset, so I'm going to try and calm down here. Okay?
Yeah, don't blow your top.
I'm going to try to keep my composure here and talk about this. we've got an all-party committee on democratic reform, which to me was a farce from the beginning. Because if we're going to do reform, we do not look to the people who were elected under the old system to reform the very system that they were elected under. That just doesn't make sense. It never will make sense. It was just a farce, and it was the heights of you know what.
But Rudy, let me interject there. I'm a little bit more graceful than you there, because I would say I'm okay with having these people involved, but they didn't have anybody from the outside. If they had even had a couple of members from the outside of the House of Assembly, and it's got to do with party committees. Let
me finish my point here. So I have never been more convinced than now. If anything, the 2021 fiasco election is going to teach us is this: we need a democratic reform commission,
absolutely,
an independent party, an independent body with an unlimited budget that will sit and will review every single minute detail of our democracy and our democratic system. And it needs to be led by the smartest, most brilliant mind you can think of. I don't care where you've got to go find them. The world's leading expert on democracy. We need that individual here. We need to sit them down. We need to put a small team around them. Okay? And we need to give them the resources that they require. We need to allow them to go out and interview whoever they so may desire. Politicians, former politicians, political scientists, individuals, buddy down the road with a shed. I don't care what it takes. Anybody with an idea needs to bring this to the table. And these people need to listen, and they need to take those ideas, and they need to form a system that works for Newfoundland and Labrador, whether that's secession, whether that's a change in how we do the House of Assembly, whether that's a consensus government, whatever it is, whatever we can come up with that's going to work for this province, we need to do it, because we're going under, boys. We're sinking the fastest time. What we're doing now is not working. It's never worked. It hasn't worked for 60 years, and it's finally caught up with us.
And so the thing about it is, in this premier we have now, and in his leadership bid, we've talked about it, Rudy, about talking about how things are going to be done differently and how decisions are going to be made through consensus and all that stuff. But here we have decisions being pushed back to the premier's office. Committees are answerable to the premier's office. Task force are answerable to the premier's office. And we see that the power is being centralized again right in the premier's office. And instead of moving forward in the 21st century, we're going back to the most archaic system of governance that we could possibly go back to.
Yeah. And I mean, Graydon, we've been calling for this for a while, and we've been saying that this is what's needed. And I mean, Calvin says here, I've been pushing for a coalition party of independents, but often falls on deaf ears. You know, Calvin, that's what some people have been advocating for. You know, a system of government where, you know, parties are diminished. And
that's what we've been advocating for.
That's what we've been advocating for, definitely. Here's a voice from a current elected MHA, Paul Lane. Under our system, we elect a 4-year dictatorship. I mean, we know that
those are powerful words, Rudy.
It is, and we know that the premier office is very powerful and directs especially in a majority government situation. But you know what, Graydon? What bothers me most, I think, is the fact that the premier's office drives the agenda and drives the directive of the overall government. But who drives the premier's office? We've heard so many things here over the last little while about who's pulling the strings behind the scenes and whatnot.
We can speculate all we want, can't we? But
exactly, right?
But so, listen, the way it is now in getting information and truth and honesty out of government, you're never going to know.
No, exactly, right?
So Rudy, let's look at a way. Let's look at again because time is going fast. But I want to bring in something else right now. We talk about governance, and we talk about the premier doing their job, and we talk about elected officials doing their job. Today I got a call from a news media source and wanted me to talk about the Premier's Advisory Council on Tourism.
Right.
Again, we see another. Again, we see another task force, another committee, and basically, this is what I said today, and I couldn't say it any other way. I don't know if I sounded rude or what, but whatever.
You're not doing much. You're not doing much to calm me down here, Graydon.
No, I'm sorry, but you take a deep breath now while I share this. So we've got 7 recommendations from the Advisory Council on Tourism. Basically, to sum it up. The Advisory Council is saying, Department of Tourism, do your job. There's no mind-shattering decisions here. They talk about giving the current vaccine timelines up on the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. We would like to, open up our province on April 10th to people that have been vaccinated and these non-vaccinated from low prevalence and positivity rates. Okay, so they want people to come in who's been vaccinated. Again, I guess there's going to be some documentation for these people that have had their vaccination and they can come in the province. Then it goes down to number 3 here, where businesses have an opening plan, the operations that would be submitted to Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador as part of the plan. All staff should have the COVID app downloaded. A suggestion, something I'm assuming that they cannot force on people to download this. So we have things here. We have 7 recommendations that should be put out there and should be put forward by the Department of Tourism. And this is just common sense stuff. And I'm sure if the Premier and anybody else went to the hospitality business owners or went to Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador, this is exactly what they would have said. Why did we need a special task force to come up and do the job that the department itself is supposed to be doing? This is the kind of governance we're getting. We're asking people to tell us what to do. And once you tell us what to do, we'll decide whether or not we're going to adhere to your recommendations.
I go back, and I mean, there's another task force that was put in place as well, Graydon. The economic task force that has a delayed deep breath here now. And the economic task force led by Dame Moya Green. And the most telling part about the press conference that she had there a while ago, when she announced that the report was going to be delayed, she said that this was actually a really easy thing to do because the Department of Finance and stuff had a lot of the work already done.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we've got what I would consider, Graydon, a very capable public service, what most people consider a very bloated public service. Mm-hmm. And we've got all these resources in government, supposedly the best, the brightest, the smartest people that we can find. We're paying them all very good salaries. Our second biggest expenditure in this province is salaries. Yeah. Okay. So after healthcare, so I mean, we're spending millions and hundreds of millions of dollars a year for these people to do work that's supposedly supposed to run and lead this province. However, whenever we want something done, we've got to go outside and find somebody that can do the work and form a task force. I never understood it, and I don't know why. I think it's all platitudes, personally. I think it's just to say, look what we're doing, or look what we're moving forward on. It's just lip service to me, because at the end of the day, it's a moot point. It's all common sense. It's all stuff that we already knew. We went out now and we commissioned this task force. I don't know if any of these individuals got paid. I'll be honest with you, Graydon, I don't even know who was on the task force. But I would.
There's a bunch.
Yeah, so I assume it was made public, but I mean, at the end of the day, um, a lot of this is just empty platitudes that is not going to come to much fruition in my
Well,
mind.
here's what Mr. Lane said about task force. They are put in place to allow government to avoid dealing with issues and kick the can down the road.
Likely, that's the other reason, because I mean, they're a scapegoat in a lot of cases, I think, right?
Mr. Keats made a point here, Rudy. He said, look, if government in all jurisdictions in Canada had been proactive with COVID-19 or any other major issue, we would not be where we are. We would not be here right now. There is no political will to do what is best for the people. The only political will is what exists in self-promotion and perpetuation of the status quo.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. And Bernie says the money wasted on surveys and task force are a waste of time. It's money in someone else's pocket. Bernie, it's an interesting point that you raise there, because I wonder how much of it is to appease industry or to appease a consulting group that's probably assisting in these task force. I wonder where the money goes in all these, in some of these task forces, and if someone were to sit down and do a little bit of an investigation to find out how much money was actually funneled through some of these task force groups to certain individuals and certain groups or certain industry people that are probably friends of a certain political party.
Yeah. I want to say, I mean, and Rudy, I mean, there's other things we could have talked about tonight, but time is gone, and it's easy to get excited and passionate about this, because it's hard for people to accept, but we do. And I know me and you have had this conversation, and I know I do what I do. I am fighting the fight because I am concerned about Newfoundland and Labrador. This is not about Graydon Pelley. It's nothing about NL Alliance for me, because it's all about, for me, it's about Newfoundland and Labrador. I love this place. My family is here. I want to be here. I want to live here forever. I want my family to be here. And the thing about it is, people have to begin realizing, and people that are making comments here, they understand this, and people that are listening understand. There are people who wants to get involved in furthering and bettering the province of Newfoundland and Labrador for the right reasons. We are here. I'm here because I decide to be here, not because I have to be. I'm doing what I'm doing because I believe in this province. I believe in its people, and I believe that if we do it right, I guarantee you that we can have a prosperous future and a bright future, a strong future for our children and our grandchildren in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Absolutely. So it's been a great night, Graydon. Great chat as always. So thank you for everybody that joined us on our not our regular night. We had some scheduling issues yesterday. Normally we're here on Wednesday night. If all goes well, then we will be here next Wednesday night at 7:30, and hopefully we'll have another strong conversation about.
And Rudy, I really want this election to get finalized, because we got some great guests lined up to come on our podcast after the election. They want to wait until the election is over, and we've got some great conversations coming up. We
do, and we're kind of here in limbo right now, and we understand that some people who want to talk about some issues, but they're afraid that they'll be lost and whatnot in the election and come across as related to the election and whatnot, and obviously they're not. So hopefully this gets wrapped up very soon, and we can talk about it some more with some very interesting people.
Rudy, there's a couple of more topics I wanted to talk about tonight, but we're going to have to keep it till next week or some other time. The Atlantic bubble. We're about to get involved with the Atlantic bubble again. Big move. And about that. And also I want to talk about the capelin fishery and seals.
Hot topic.
It is, and there's some interesting things going around and interesting conversations to be had. And But of course, we're always going to talk about politics.
Obviously, yeah. It all comes back to the issues facing Newfoundland and Labrador. All right,
Absolutely.
Graydon. Well, you have yourself a good evening, sir, and we will
I
talk
will.
to you again very soon.
Thanks, everybody, for listening, for your comments, and we will be in touch.
Have a good night.
Take care.